Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Our Future Podcast. I'm your host, Simran Sandhu. I'm joined by my co-founder and co-host, Michael Sikand, and this is the go-to entrepreneurship show for young people. We give you the tactics and strategies young people have used to win in business. And in today's episode, we've got two young founders, one person who is worth over $100 million selling drones to the police. Okay, a little crazy. And another young founder who has raised tens of millions to help you get your travel visas in minutes. Now, Mike, before we kick off the show, anything you want to say?
Well, dude, the reason I'm not in my current recording environment is I just gave like a sales pitch to like my girlfriend, her sister, and her mom. And I felt like I was a like Jordan Belfort, you know, when they move into that garage in the Wolf of Wall Street and he like whips off the towel and it's like Stratton Oakmont. I was like giving like a straight curriculum on sales to these girls. So it's actually just a quick anecdote before we start. Their business is really interesting. So they do daily office rentals for like big Silicon Valley companies. It's so interesting because these companies all have huge offices out here in the Valley, but their CEOs are always looking for like a third office space to like run private meetings. Like ain't nobody trying to listen. Like they're trying to do some private shit. Like, for example, they've had had their layoffs at these offices. Like they've done, special team offsites and stuff. So I came up with the genius sales strategy. I got them on LinkedIn Sales Navigator cooking, targeting executive assistants to all these CEOs, the big Silicon Valley companies. And I think it's going to work. That was my today.
The boy went from not knowing sales to a month ago to now training other people. This is the kind of fast progression, quick learning curve that we're hoping to instill with folks who listen to this show. So kick us off with the first story.
Well, dude, this guy who we're about to talk about, I mean, he has a crazy sales story in himself. Like, imagine cold calling a police department to get your first deal. That's this guy. Okay, for one, like this dude is wacky as hell. His name is Blake Resnick. He's 23 years old, and he's attained a personal net worth of $100 million by creating a police drone startup that's backed by Sam Altman. So Blake, if you look at the guy, he just looks like goofy as hell. Like his hair's all over the place. I mean, he looks like he was electrocuted while doing some like crazy experiment. And it's probably valid because his first project, he was 14 years old and he built a nuclear fusion reactor. He was accepted into university at age 14. And, you know, while he was in college, he originally went to the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And unfortunately, the tragedy of the Mandalay Bay shooter at that concert happened. And he just became super curious. How could we deploy technology to make sure that these egregious events never happen again? So he ends up getting the Thiel Fellowship and drops out to launch Brinc drones, which is a tech company that provides, you know, various tools to police departments to assist in public safety. And it's interesting because while he was in high school, he actually had an internship at Tesla when he was a teenager and got to meet Elon Musk before taking his next internship at DJI. That's the Chinese drone company that has kind of the most popular product in market. You've probably heard of them, right?
I haven't, no. What does their drone do that's so cool?
I mean, you just see like some kid on the beach, like flying it around, like taking video. Like that's the DJI product. But he was there, and I think that's what put the drone idea in his mind. Anyways, he builds a drone. I don't know how. Like, you and I aren't technical, but he builds a drone, cold calls the Las Vegas SWAT, and is like, listen, I got the goods. You're going to want to see this. His company now, Brinc, develops a drone that can break through windows, has two-way microphones so that police can communicate with a potential assailant virtually. For example, one time, one of his drones in a SWAT situation brought a pack of cigarettes to a man who was in a hostage situation because that's what he asked for. So it has LiDAR, it can go indoors. Again, it can break windows. So it's a super advanced drone product that is essentially revolutionizing the way police departments can go about their business. Now, those are niche cases. Deploying this drone into like a hostage situation, definitely they would do it. But mainly what it's used for is the minute a 911 call goes out, the drone will go survey what the F is going on and will help the police understand should they send like X amount of response, how many officers, just understand the situation and help, the police focus on the events that need their attention the most. company's now valued at 300 million. They recently raised a $25 million round, and I think actually their total funding is up to 80 million, but the company's valued at 300 M's. Blake actually owns more than 50% of the business, which is crazy. They have 500 active contracts with police departments, and they're kind of continuing to develop new tech. It's kind of like Anduril, like Palmer Luckey type business, but it's absolutely wild what this kid has been able to pull off. And there's a bunch of interesting implications around like the drone space that he's taking advantage of. So mind blown,
it sounds
right?
really cool. I mean, clearly a very smart founder, but I mean, I see a lot of adjacent use cases. I mean, the fact that they tapped into, you know, police departments, I think it makes me think that they can also tap into, you know, fire stations and, you know, other kind of maybe even like healthcare related use cases as well, right? Because the example that you gave where it's going to the site where someone placed the call to kind of determine the level of priority or importance on like, you know, whether they need to service this person or in what time frame, it almost gives like an element of like triage, which is what happens in healthcare, right? So it's like you go into the emergency room and they kind of like look at you up and down and they're like, okay, like how far along are you on the spectrum of priorities? Like, are you like bleeding away and going to die in the next 15 minutes and we'll go see you first? Or are you like here, you know, with the cold and, you know, you keep calling in and, you know, we can wait, you know, several hours before they get to this person. So
dude,
I'm
going to be like,
yeah.
I'm going to be like sick in my hospital bed and like a drone's going to come by the window and be like, that dude's fine. He doesn't need his shot. Like, what?
Dude, I was thinking of something funny too. It's like, you know, imagine, I don't know, someone goes to rob your house and like out of nowhere, this drone comes in and it's like watching you getting robbed, but instead of helping, it just flies away.
It's like, wait. Yeah, so these things are
man.
launched in like mobile command centers and they get like launched off. So they're kind of spread across the city, ready to act whenever it's needed. But I agree, there's a lot of adjacencies into selling into public service departments. Like I think the Coast Guard and the military is obviously fair game. You know, look at what Anduril did with its drones on the border. Here's what's super interesting about building drones in America. DJI is the biggest drone company. They do a variety of services. Even some law enforcement departments will buy a DJI to use for, you know, this police use. But there's sanctions against the company. It's Chinese. So there's this like a movement happening across a number of states to ban Chinese-made drones from being able to operate in the United States. So, you know, potentially, you know, I guess there's a lot of national security risks around that. So as a homegrown domestic Uncle Sam, we align with police departments type company, it could be a good wedge to really establish themselves as like the American drone company because no one's really been able to crack it outside of DJI.
Yeah, I think you run into this issue with any kind of surveillance technology. Like, disregard China for a second. I could see people getting really, really upset with like drones being used at, you know, by police departments as well, right? Like, I think anyone who is using this as like a, you know, we're using this for your safety or we're using this to make sure that, you know, like things are going as they should can also be used for nefarious purposes. And so I think there is a level of like mistrust that, you know, they'll have to overcome, right? All it takes is like one bad situation and then, you know, some journal, you know, some news article comes out about it and now everybody hates it and it's going viral over like how police departments need to get rid of drones and like why this is so bad. And it becomes like the next hot topic. Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt. You know, like police deploying AI soldiers and like the military doing that. And like, it has crazy implications, but I think like clearly he's identified like these use cases. Like the police need this technology. They need to create safer environments. They have limited resources. They need to allocate their time, their energy, their resources in the most efficient manner possible. It's interesting. Peter Thiel actually gave him the advice to go after the public safety market instead of like going for a consumer play or anything like that, because that's where the tech was like most nascent. So that's where like the demand was, but like nobody had really met the need of the market as like a government contractor in that way. Another interesting part about this is he moved the company's headquarters to Seattle, and they were able to poach a bunch of ex-employees, executives from like Amazon Air, SpaceX, Blue Origin,
probably
Boeing.
Microsoft.
Yeah. So that was like another strategic move to kind of like grab that talent with all the funding that they have. It's actually, 80 million total funding to date. And you know how we always talked about the Figma dude is in like all the creative, like tech, like artistic design platforms? He's also in this business. So that guy's got a pretty broad book.
Dude, someone must have put his phone number out on like a yellow pages or something. Cause like this guy just has like, he must be pretty accessible. Like all of these companies are super, super cool. And I will give him his, kudos or credit, because I feel like every company that like Dylan Field is a part of, like they are very, very interesting. And for some reason, they also seem to be ultra successful. So maybe he's just got that like Midas touch, if you will. But
dude, I think Dylan Field should be the host of Our Future podcast.
But yeah, I mean, if he wants it, he can have it. Tell me this, what's it like selling into, these public service departments? And is there any like tactical insights around that?
They have 400 contracts, but I think the insights are all around, like, for example, they use this statistic: Brinc's drones have led to a 54% reduction in human response times because the drones clear non-priority calls so humans can focus on what matters. It's probably a slow sales cycle, but I can imagine data like that is very compelling.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I see why it makes sense. I would just be curious of like, how hard is it really? I bet, most of these police departments or a lot of these public service departments, they probably know where this technology is headed. Like, I think, they get a rep of just being really behind and like really slow at adopting new technologies. But I don't think you can mistake that with like ignorance. Like I'm sure that they know these technologies are coming and that they're going to be available to them. But I've got to imagine there's like some level of resistance. And, maybe it's some level of like, to the point we're talking about earlier, which is, hey, what will the public think about us using drones, right, in this way? Or maybe it's just even like, normal bureaucracy type stuff of like, just trying to get contracts pushed in is really, really hard. I don't know if I know the exact details to this, but I know there's also like, specific budgeting things that take place within these public service departments that also, can pose to be an issue when it comes to trying to sell into them, right? Like there's only certain periods where they can allocate certain kinds of spend. So that may be an element that plays into this as well.
Yeah, I think like the biggest risk factor, so there are competitors. There's a couple. There's one funded by the CIA. There's one funded by Kevin Durant. What are the names of these guys? I don't know why he's in the drone company. Probably because he can like reach him and grab him. But yeah, there's a few other players in the space, but I really think it's like, have you heard of the concept of NIMBYism?
No.
So it's not in my backyard. So we've seen like green energy suffer from this, wherein like people don't want windmills like blocking their view, or they don't want green energy projects in their neighborhood. I think the real threat to this is probably like the American public, right? Like look at the city of San Francisco banning facial recognition technology for all the sinister 1984-esque issues it could present. Think about all the positive it could do, right? So I don't know. I think, like you said, like a public backlash, or the minute one of these drones fucks up and like maybe kills somebody, like one of the hostages in a situation like that, I mean, that's going to be a very tough thing for that company to handle.
Well, dude,
the police can do whatever they want.
No, I was going to say, dude, you just made me think of, that recent news article that came out this past week with, I think it was either Marshalls or TJ Maxx, about all of the employees having cameras, clipped to them. And so it was this element that they were trying to reduce the amount of shoplifting taking place, because they thought it would be a deterrent if they knew all the employees had cameras on them. But people were pissed. It was like, no, I don't want to go shop at a store where they're literally recording me as I'm like walking through the aisles.
I feel like that like expresses guilt. Like, I don't care if they're filming me. I'm about to go grab my like Marshall shit. I don't know. I'm not worried. I think people overplay like their privacy. Like, I think if people were really mad, they'd make make their voice a little louder on what Facebook and Google have been doing for the past 2 decades, which is surveillance capitalism. They know our next move.
I think they have, though. I think people are like very up in arms about what like big tech companies are doing.
I don't think so. I think like GDPR was like that one like European based thing. I think Americans are a lot more lax. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they just don't have as much of an issue with like this stuff until, something like really, until like a news story goes viral and people are talking on Facebook about it. But like like Cambridge Analytica, but people aren't going to stop using these products. But I think we're entering a new phase of surveillance. I think surveillance companies, AI identification and videos and all these technologies are going to be pretty wild. So I think it's a decent space for any young entrepreneur interested in hardware to think about a lot is AI and surveillance.
Well, I would talk about like the flip side of this, which is, there's been a lot of conversations, especially as of recently, which is like software is dead, blah, 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 blah. But this could be interesting, which is like software being used specifically to power these hardware tools. And so, maybe you're not a hardware or deep tech kind of founder, but you can build software. And so it makes me wonder of like, what kind of software can be created around the drones or the way that maybe the police tracks these fleets being sent out. There's got to be some like supplemental software that can be built to better optimize certain things. Maybe it's like the way the drones are flying or something along those lines. I would encourage people around like figure out what like I would figure out what deep technology is being built or like, hardware is being created. That seems like it could have a lot of mass adoption just through like specific channel partnerships and such, and try to find like this like subsidiary software of sorts that you can build around those things.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that.
MFM talks about like the barnacle on a whale strategy, right? And this is kind of one variation of that, right? Like, we have this friend Ritwick who just left his or just sold his company, and now he is working at a company that powers hardware subscriptions. And I thought that was a really interesting play.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I like the barnacle on a whale, like, just like catch a tailwind. Like if I'm not going to be a whale, like you best be a barnacle. You know what I mean? Because in this case, this Blake Resnick kid, I mean, he's clearly a genius. But yeah, follow along. I think even like an industry vertical media publication around all the technologies being built for the American defense and police force industry could be super fascinating too.
Dude, that would crush.
Yes.
Meant for, public service departments and like the heads of them, like that would do really, really well. For sure.
Well, I think this brings us to a next story. Isn't it like related to governments and like is it any B2G, like, or is it more consumer?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue into our second story today. So for our second story, we have this founder who is in his late 20s. He's raised millions of dollars from A16Z and the Chainsmokers to build this company called Atlys. And so the problem that he was facing was he was traveling to multiple countries for work and was spending hours of his time filling out visa applications and submitting documents. But he realized the big opportunity was expediting this process and helping people do this in minutes. And so through their app or their website, you essentially can take a selfie, scan your passport, answer a few questions about your trip, and then once you pay, you can track the application in real time. Now, there are competitors who are also dedicated to expediting the visa application, but there's a few key features that he has that makes them different. So one, you can take passport photos through the app, and then you can go pick it up at a Walgreens. You can also get a letter of employment signed by your manager through their platform. And then they've also built a prediction engine that predicts when you'll get your visa. The company claims that 99.2% of the visas that they've processed through their platform have come back on time. And there's a few big tailwinds at play here. One, the global e-market visa is expected to 2x from 2023 to 2032, especially as the world just kind of adopts these digital processes. And more than 60% of countries have moved to the e-visa system, and Mohak is predicting that over the next 5 years, almost every country will be moved to e-visas. So I think it's really interesting. This is something that I personally faced, which is, when we've tried to get visas for India, it's like one of those things where you got to go drive to the Chicago embassy, and it's like a hassle. Like I really hate that entire process. So during COVID, essentially every country was on lockdown, but the Bahamas just had a very traveler friendly policy. And so they were one of the first countries to kind of lift the restrictions. And so they just focused in on the Bahamas when they were starting out, and the platform essentially like took off like wildfire, and like they got a ton of traffic, and that was the start. But yeah, like the Bahamas was their wedge, and it was like a COVID-esque play that ended up being and turning them into a really big company now.
Dude, I think the whole like identity market and like these businesses that are in like the travel market, like Clear is like super cool, and like there are states rolling out mobile driver's licenses. So I think like taking advantage of the digitization of this stuff is a huge trend. That's another massive tailwind to discuss. Am I like a privileged American? Like I've traveled the world. Like I've been to Africa, I've been to India, I've been to Singapore, I've been to Japan. Like I've never dealt with this before. Like what exactly is this? You have to get a visa to travel to another country? Because I've never had to deal with that before.
What, getting a visa for something?
Yeah, I don't remember ever having to do it, even when I'm traveling without my parents.
I think it depends on the country you're going to. I know that like being an American citizen, it's actually like a quite a luxury when it comes to international travel, because most places in Europe just accept your passport on like on stamp. Like you don't even need a visa for it. But I think we're like the anomaly in that case. I think every other country you need visas to go there, right? Like you're not getting into the US without a visa.
Is this targeted at like Asian markets mainly?
I'm assuming that he was targeting, you know, folks trying to get into India and vice versa. Was like kind of the use case that he was envisioning for himself. But I think right now he's thinking like global expansion, like let's get this to over 150 countries over the next few months, and like let's really dominate this.
Yeah, I wonder, you know, if these e-visa platforms accept like developer integrations, like you know, how can a private company like, you know, be able to facilitate this stuff? I mean, I think that would be probably like a pretty interesting question, is like, how open are these ecosystems for like companies to build memberships and subscriptions for people to be able to process documents and send things on people's behalf?
Well, that's an interesting point that you bring up, right? Because the integrations that they've built in are things that don't actually apply to, apply to a government agency per se, right? Like their integrations are like integrating with Walgreens, so you can like process your passport pictures and then you can go pick them up, or like a letter that would go through your employer via DocuSign. So they're not actually like doing the things that like, you know, a government agency would want to integrate with specifically, but rather the things you would need to assemble your application so you can send it to the agency.
Dude, it's interesting. I know a Stanford grad, Emily, she was on the Forbes Under 30, and she's created a company called Formally, which helps like immigrate. It's a document platform for immigration lawyers to work with their clients and like monitor progress and like best practices. So it sounds like this company is more like a templatized service to help you like check all the boxes for what you need to apply for one of these visas, right? And then
that's right. Yeah. I mean, the big benefit of this platform is that, hey, it takes you hours and it's confusing and it's annoying, and each country may have their own application process.
Yeah.
We're just going to help you do this in minutes. And all you got to do is just like the basic passport photo stuff, answer a few questions, and we'll take care of you from there.
You know what's another cool feature this company could have? A partnership with a pharmacy or healthcare company to help you get the vaccines and pills necessary to go travel to a country that has maybe infectious diseases. Like I know when I went to Africa, I had to get my malaria pills and stuff like that. That could be another like interesting part of this. And maybe they could even expand into like hospitality, travel, flight booking. Like maybe this could be the epicenter for how you plan an entire vacation.
Yeah, I think they definitely want to stay in travel tech from what I can tell, but they're definitely thinking of like other products that they can kind of extend into, right? So they're focusing on like credit for travel, remittance, travel insurance. So it is a very pure and true like travel tech company.
Dude, it's funny you mentioned the Bahamas. Bahamas was one of the first countries to roll out a pay for passport program. I made an Our Future story a while back. And it was all about how rich people in like foreign countries would buy passports for hundreds of thousands, and governments were down with it. Like, especially the sketchier governments, because they could then be a citizen, harbor money there, right? Tax-free, wash money. And then they could just pay for that hundreds of thousands to get that citizenship. So it was like a revenue. He created a new revenue driver for governments through this pay for passport program. So, there's a lot of opportunity.
Dude, some of these governments are trying, man. Like the ones that are struggling financially, they're always trying to find some loophole. I think there was some country in the EU that was like trying to give like a golden passport or something, where it essentially gave you like I don't know if it was citizenship, but it was like access to the entire EU, and you just had to pay like a big lump sum fee. And the rest of the EU countries were not having it. They're just like, hey,
if you want to know,
just because we let you in doesn't mean you can just give it to everybody. And I thought that was so funny.
If you want to know why Brexit happened, it's probably that. These Brits ain't trying to have some mofo get over from some, buku ass Eastern European country. I think it might have been a country that starts with an M. I think it might have been like Macedonia or something, dude. That's crazy.
Macedonia.
What can we learn?
Kudos to them for trying.
What can we learn from this founder? Like, are there any tactics or strategies that he employed that like you think are transferable? Other than getting great VCs and going after a good market.
So I still think there's a bunch of takeaways, right? So one is like, I think the travel tech industry itself is still very like, there's still a ton of lucrative opportunities. I think that like most people are focusing on like what you do when you get into the country, but not too many are focused on like, how do you get in these countries, right? So we're seeing a lot of businesses being built around like experiences, rentals, trips and stuff once you're in, right? But this is an example of a company that helps you get in, facilitate the travel process.
Yeah.
I like that. Another one that I thought was really, really interesting is this company called Point Hound. This is a YC company that I came across, but they essentially just like optimize, flights and give you opportunities based off of the points that you've accumulated from your credit card. Right. So if I have 50,000 Amex points, it essentially gives me a bunch of flight options and trips around like the points and try to gives me the biggest, bang for my buck, if you will.
So I like
these kind of unique plays.
I'm definitely going to use that. I'm trying to figure out how to use my points towards the end of the summer. That's awesome. I like that business model. It's also like those guys we met at Rove, like they're building a travel card for Gen Z. To help access some of those travel deals and mileage that, kind of younger folk might not get as much access to. So yeah, that's cool, man.
I think I think this just goes to show, right? Like if it's like, hey, I want to go build, another, I don't know, short-term housing, Airbnb of X type of opportunity, right? That's going to be very saturated, right? Everyone is thinking of the easy ideas. And so you just have to look in a different place along the value chain. There's still so much opportunity. It doesn't matter how saturated the space has become, right? Like, so I would say like in AI right now, it feels like everyone is trying to build tools for developers, but there's got to be something where if you just like change where you're pointing the aim at, or like where you're putting your microscope at, there's a much higher leverage opportunity that exists. I don't know what that is. Is it the cost associated with building developer tools? Is that something you can focus on, or what is that? I don't know. But this is an example, right? It's like everyone is focused on hospitality and like making things fun and flashy and stuff. And they chose the most boring part out of this entire thing. Hey, submitting your visa to the government agency so you can like, you can get into the country.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I'll end this on an interesting note. I think legal tech has gotten a bad rap over the past decade in startups because a lot of people built tools for like lawyers. Like, for example, like Justin Kahn's like Atrium, I think it was called, failed. And it's because like people didn't want to adopt this tech. But like, look at consumer hurdles around legalities. I think that's super fascinating. My friend's mom, she was my first ever podcast guest back in the day. She built a company called Real Identities, which was a platform that helped restaurants understand. It was like a playbook to be able to identify what a fake ID looks like. And it had all the examples there. So I don't know. I just think there's a lot of manual, like shitty tasks that go into a lot of these state agency, government agency tactics, whether it could be like that guy at Sweet Spot, like applying for government contracts, or like trying to get like you have to submit documentation to get like a campsite at Yosemite, or like something like there are all these BS processes you could totally create a platform out of.
Dude, totally. There was something else that I thought was interesting about this, which was before Mohak really focused on Atlys, he was trying to build a different company. And the company that he was focusing on was also around a specific kind of arbitrage. So he was traveling back home, for holidays, and friends would always ask him to bring like iPhones and MacBooks because there was a price arbitrage. So he decided to turn it into a side hustle, and he built a marketplace that connected people traveling with others that needed something from that country. It ultimately didn't work because there's like a lot of friction around like import and export laws.
Yeah.
But I thought it was like something really interesting. There's got to be some other tool around this that could be built that someone could do, because it's so true right now. Like, for example, I was just talking to my family in India around, something US goods related, and they were just telling me like how expensive it is now, because like the inflation in like India is just like crazy right now. So it's like $1 is worth like 87 rupees. And so they were just like, hey, like, it's going to cost us a lot of money. So why don't you like buy it over there and like send it over to us? And it just made me think like, yeah, like inflation is growing, and it's been an issue here in the US, but it's an even worse issue abroad in most places. And so there's got to be some arbitrage around specific kind of goods that can be done. I don't know what that is, but I think if someone really wanted to go down that rabbit hole, they could probably find something interesting.
Completely agree. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap. Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Our Future Podcast. Simi and I love doing this every week. Please leave your feedback and comments in the comment section, and make sure to be subscribed wherever you watch or listen. We'll be with you next week with more cool stories about young cats building big things. Peace out.
Stay frosty.
Stay frosty. Bye-bye.